On the night of the Lantern Festival, after finishing the glutinous rice balls at my mother-in-law's house, I was ready to head home with my 1-year-old daughter. Just as I was about to leave, my mother-in-law handed me a stick of incense, her expression serious. She said, "It's hard to walk at night. Kids can easily get entangled with unclean things. Light this incense for safety." I found this quite absurd, so I recorded a short video and posted it on Douyin, not expecting it to go viral within minutes. Among tens of thousands of comments, the first one made my skin crawl. "Lighting incense alone at midnight. Are you trying to attract all the hungry ghosts in the wilderness back to your home?" The glutinous rice balls my mother-in-law made were soft and chewy. With a spoonful of rice wine, they tasted unique. As the aroma of black sesame lingered on my palate, my mother-in-law urged me to hurry home. She deftly packed my daughter's bottles and diapers while repeating the same old warnings until I felt like my ears were developing calluses. "Don't take the child near the water. There are many water ghosts, especially by the river between the two neighborhoods. Don't chat with strangers on the way, or you might break the true fire. It's safest to go straight home." I picked up my daughter, Little Orange, feeling a bit helpless about my mother-in-law's superstitions. I said lightly, "Mom, we should uphold the banner of science and dispel these superstitions." Instead of getting upset, she smiled at me like a mischievous child and playfully responded, "Then let's pretend we're playing this game with Mom." Her tone was light and childlike, making me smile back, finding it amusing. However, as I opened the door to leave, she called me back and turned to the kitchen to light a stick of incense. From a distance, I heard her sincerely reciting, "Oh kitchen god, please don't blame me. Today, I borrow your fire to light this incense to protect my granddaughter so she arrives home safely. May the little ghosts avoid us, may the living stay away." After bowing, she approached me, took the incense, and firmly placed it in my hand, her expression serious and unyielding. "Children are weak, they're easily entangled with unclean things at night. Your husband is away on a business trip. I'm worried about you and Little Orange returning home alone. Light the incense for safety." I sighed, feeling the pressure, a bit impatient, but didn't show it. She had already lit the incense, and as her junior, it would be inappropriate to refuse during the festival, so I held on to the incense. After all, it was just an extra item to carry, and if it eased her mind, it seemed worth it. Holding Little Orange in one arm and the incense in the other, I awkwardly walked into the elevator, feeling somewhat ridiculous. The more I thought about it, the funnier it seemed, so I recorded another video for Douyin with the caption, "My mother-in-law is so funny, she gave me a stick of incense to take home." But before long, my phone buzzed non-stop. Balancing my daughter, I pulled out my phone to check. The video had gone viral, with countless likes and comments pouring in. I smiled widely, it was my first experience of such popularity. However, my smile froze as I scrolled down to the top comment. "The blogger is really clueless. A stick of incense in the dark attracts countless hungry ghosts mourning for the deceased. You're an idiot if you think this is funny. Wait until you and your child are harmed, then you'll know how funny it really is." Although I didn't believe in this, the thousands of comments reminded me that the incense was perhaps not as harmless as it seemed. The cold north wind rustled the treetops, and the chill seeped into my bones. Despite wearing a down jacket, my legs still shook from the cold, and my sense of unease intensified. Even as an atheist, I felt a tinge of fear in that moment after reading so many comments. My mother-in-law had been living alone since her divorce many years ago. Before marrying my husband, I specifically bought a home next to her so I could visit often, causing our relationship to deepen over time. But recently, the main gate between the two neighborhoods was under renovation, so I had to take a longer route that included crossing a narrow bridge. It was only about a 10-minute walk, quite close, and I would arrive in no time. To be honest, having known my mother-in-law for many years, I always found her to be a kind elder. While she was occasionally superstitious, she never meant any harm. I truly didn't think she would harm me on this short journey, but I couldn't help but wonder where she learned these things from. As the likes on the video continued to rise, I received more private messages, most expressing concern. My heart sank further. "Sister, your baby is too cute, but you need to be careful with your mother-in-law. Taking only a stick of incense like that? Here, we only do that on the day of a funeral. You should throw that incense away. You have no idea how many wandering souls it could attract. Kids shouldn't see this. Your mother-in-law might just be a bit clueless, but honestly, you shouldn't carry incense like that. It's meant to guide the deceased. Hey girl, are you okay? I hope your next video shows you made it home safely. I turned off my phone but couldn't help glancing at the incense in my hand. The bright red incense flickered in the dark, its glow eerie and inconsistent. The smoky air surrounded me, making everything feel unreal, as if a barrier protected me or a fog trapped me in. I hesitated on the roadside, wondering, I haven't wronged my mother-in-law recently, but could this incense really be as bad as the commenters claimed? I searched for related knowledge in my mind but was instead flooded with a childhood memory. In the 3rd grade, when my grandmother passed away, my uncle lit incense and walked in front of the coffin to guide her to the grave. My mother-in-law had lived in a village years ago, so she shouldn't have made such a basic mistake. Feeling confused, I opened the video again. Many users shared strange screenshots and warned me with red circles. In one screenshot, as I held my child, a ghostly face seemed to flicker in the smoke. The sight sent chills down my spine, and Little Orange began to squirm restlessly, mumbling indistinctly as though she was uncomfortable. Just then, my phone rang abruptly, startling me. I quickly answered, seeing my mom's cheerful picture on the screen. Hello, Mom, what's up? My mother's voice was clear but carried a hint of unusual anxiety. Sweetheart, are you almost home? I saw the doing you posted. Lighting a stick of incense alone at night is wrong, it gives me the creeps. It must be your superstitious mother-in-law again, right? Quickly throw it away. I'll wait for you at your door. The surrounding neighborhoods were brightly lit, with red lanterns still hung up for the New Year celebrations. After hanging up with my mom, I felt a warmth in my heart, my sense of safety returning. After some contemplation, I decided to just extinguish the incense and casually placed it in a flower bed. But as the smoke dissipated, I began to hear soft whispers around me. Listening closely, I realized they were talking about me. That poor woman, her mother-in-law has cursed her, bringing home unclean things. Right? I've drifted for so many years, and I've never seen a child with such a fate. The evil spirit she attracted is truly terrifying. Let's stay away so we don't get our souls scared out of us. Luckily, she was smart enough to extinguish the incense, otherwise, tonight would be. Following the voices, I looked up and froze in fear. 2 strange figures with gray faces were perched in a tree, swaying precariously. Upon closer inspection, I noticed they had no feet, and their clothes were made of paper, with lips and skin devoid of color. Little Orange seemed to sense something and suddenly burst into tears. I shifted my stiff body, thinking anxiously, am I really seeing ghosts today? As I took a few steps forward, the 2 spirits remained where they were. The taller one looked at me, a glint of glee in his eyes. This girl is finished. Her fate will be traded for. The shorter one quickly covered his mouth, scolding. Don't speak carelessly, the secrets of heaven cannot be revealed. You talk too much. Do you want to forfeit your chance to be reborn? After saying this, he glanced at me. Seeing that I was frozen in place, he questioned. Hey, why isn't she moving? Can she hear us? I was taken aback but didn't step forward, fearing that the spirit was trying to test me. If I moved now, I would undoubtedly reveal myself. The child they spoke of was likely Little Orange. As a protective mother, despite my fear, I wanted to gather more information. I couldn't let anything happen to my daughter. After all, I had carried her for 10 months and had a C-section to bring her into this world. I found a flower bed to sit on, pretending to feed Little Orange some fruit puree. After tasting some apple puree, her cries gradually subsided, though she still seemed hungry, tilting her head against me while continuing to suck. Feeling slightly relieved, I feigned nonchalance as I played with her, all the while intently listening. So, the child was just hungry, which explained why she hadn't moved. Poor little one, was her fate somehow intertwined with that of the spirit? Was that why the spirit couldn't tolerate her presence? Wealth and peace could only belong to one. Anyone would instinctively prioritize their own well-being, even if it meant sacrificing family. I bit my tongue, almost letting that thought slip. The two spirits floated closer, chattering. Thank goodness she didn't relight that incense, or she would have brought all these lonely souls back home.
If that happened, I fear the child wouldn't survive the night.
With the spirits following me, I struggled to walk, my heart racing. My mom had the electronic lock code for her home. She was already preparing sweet longan and red date water for me. As soon as she saw my red-rimmed eyes, my mom rushed over, taking Little Orange from my arms and gently patting my back.
What happened? You look so distressed today.
I held back my feelings of distress and fear, looking around to ensure the spirits hadn't followed me in before cautiously saying, Mom, you might think I'm crazy, but I feel like I saw something unclean today. My mom's face turned pale, and she touched my forehead before handing me the red date water.
Don't say silly things, especially during the holidays. Mom, I'm serious. Those two spirits followed me right to our doorstep.
Thankfully, I had never made too many extreme jokes with my mother, so her expression seemed to shift towards belief. Just then, a WeChat video call invitation pinged on my phone. I checked to see it was my mother-in-law calling, and instantly, I felt nervous and flustered. My mom remained calm, signaling me to answer the call. I took a few deep breaths and answered the video call, greeting my mother-in-law warmly.
Hi, Mom.
I just got home and wanted to drink this water before calling you. My mother-in-law's face seemed even paler than before, her tone straightforward.
What about the incense? Did you bring it back to the house?
I blinked, pretending to be nonchalant.
Oh, it was almost burnt out by the time I got home, so I just...
Before I could finish, my mother-in-law's expression shifted to one of urgency.
You silly girl, that incense is specially made. It definitely can't burn out in less than an hour. Did you hear something you shouldn't have and throw it away on the way?
She brought up the incense in front of me, causing my annoyance to flare up instantly.
Mom, in the countryside, a stick of incense is meant to guide the deceased. How could you be so unaware?
My mother-in-law interrupted me again, quickly putting on a jacket and stepping outside. Enough talking. Quick, check on Little Orange. Hurry! Interrupted twice, my frustration surged, but my child's safety came first. Though I was reluctant, I followed my mother-in-law's instructions.
Little Orange is perfectly fine. She fell asleep as soon as we got home.
I turned the camera to show my mother-in-law, but just one glance was enough for her to notice something was off.
Little Orange isn't just asleep, she's unconscious. Try calling her quickly.
I gently shook Little Orange and found her pale face frighteningly ashen. Indeed, my daughter, who usually woke at the slightest sound, wouldn't stir no matter how much I called her. My mom rushed in, and we both felt helpless in the face of the situation. My mother-in-law spoke calmly, a hint of urgency in her voice.
I'm coming right now. Don't panic, Little Orange is safe at home. Just stay inside and wait for me.
She ran incredibly fast, making the 10-minute journey in just 2. When she arrived, she was carrying a bag filled with tea, rice, sugar, silver, and other miscellaneous items. Upon entering the kitchen, she immediately got to work, lighting several stacks of paper money. Then, she brewed tea, mixed it with raw rice and sugar, and bowed in 4 directions as an offering. Once that was done, she took out another stick of incense, lit it, and placed it in our rice container. I tightly held Little Orange on the sofa, and after my mother-in-law completed her ritual, Little Orange slowly began to wake up. My mom's anxiety eased as well. She patted her chest, exhaled, and took my mother-in-law's hand, expressing her gratitude. Mother-in-law, today's events are truly unheard of. Thank goodness you were here, otherwise, we wouldn't have known what to do. Seeing Mom's warmth, my mother-in-law's expression softened considerably. Oh, what a commotion! It's all for the sake of my little granddaughter. If the little ones are good, the whole family is good. The younger generation is the hope of the older generation. Without waiting for Mom to respond, she turned to me, her tone filled with concern. You must bring that incense back, no matter what. If you don't, Little Orange might. It's best if you take Little Orange with you, so the celestial beings won't blame us. The thought of taking Little Orange out again made my heart sink. There were 2 unknown ghosts lurking outside, and I simply couldn't muster the courage to go out. Although Little Orange was awake, the complexity of the situation filled me with fear. Perhaps the person the ghosts were talking about, the one who wanted to trade fates with my daughter, was my mother-in-law. Yet, my mother-in-law still insisted that I bring back the incense. Who was I supposed to believe? Seeing my resistance, my mother-in-law's expression softened. She took my hand and said earnestly, "When my son was a child, he was just like Little Orange, with a flawed fate. He was destined to face a calamity, and during the liveliest of festivals, his life force would be seized by wandering spirits taking advantage of his vulnerability. Today is Little Orange's calamity." She led me to the sofa, gently brushed my hair, tucked it behind my ear, and continued, "I was hoping we could all be safe together today, and as long as we were safe on the way home, everything would be fine. But you panicked and threw the incense away. Surely some evil spirit has blocked your senses, making you unable to discern what's real." Although I was flustered, I didn't think there was anything wrong with the evil spirit my mother-in-law spoke of. On the contrary, I felt that posting a message online and seeking help from netizens tonight was the right thing to do. With that thought, I pretended to go to the restroom and wrote a summary of everything in the comments section, hoping to get advice from netizens. However, after reading it, everyone was divided into 2 camps. One supported my mother-in-law, and the other opposed her, which didn't help much. At that moment, my husband also saw my Douyin video. Although he was still in a meeting overseas, he still called me. He briefly recounted his childhood experiences and the stories of how my mother-in-law had saved people using seemingly superstitious methods. In short, he wanted me to trust my family and believe in our child's grandmother. After struggling, I decided to go and retrieve the incense and bring it back. But I would not take Little Orange with me. After discussing it with my mother-in-law, she agreed, but she wanted me to take Little Orange's personal clothing with me. However, as soon as I stepped outside, the 2 ghosts surrounded me again, saying excitedly, "Haha, this woman is so stupid. She actually listened to that old witch and went back to get the incense. She'll probably go but never come back. Do you think she'll wander the earth like us after she dies?" The short ghost replied with a grin, "A soul that hasn't lived its full life but is killed is the most delicious. As soon as her soul leaves her body, we'll directly break her down and absorb her. Then we'll never feel cold again." The tall ghost grinned and sniffed around me. "This woman smells as good as her child. I just hope she hurries up and picks up that life-ending incense." Hearing these words, my temples throbbed, and I didn't know what to do. The expressions on these 2 ghosts seemed to indicate that they were really looking forward to me picking up the incense. Did my mother-in-law really have a problem? But how could I explain her offering of water and rice to save Little Orange just now? I gritted my teeth and walked toward the incense, trying to see if the 2 ghosts would say anything useful. The tall ghost chuckled, "This woman is so dumb. She doesn't even know her husband is dead, and she was tricked by that ghost phone call. That's right, the voice of a dead person sounds so stiff. How could she be so stupid that she couldn't tell? Pretending to save the child is just to make her die faster, so she won't cause trouble when the little one dies." My heart clenched, and I realized they just said my husband was dead. I trembled and sent a message to my husband on WeChat, "Honey, I'm scared." There was a moment of hesitation on the other end, and then a cold "add oil" sticker came back. Honestly, that wasn't like my husband at all. The tall ghost gloated again, his voice sharp and triumphant. "How will that evil spirit kill this woman when she gets to the incense? Will it scare her to death? Or will it possess her and make her jump off a building?" The short ghost shuddered and wrapped his arms around himself. "Stop it, you're scaring even me, and I'm a ghost. Will that evil spirit eat us too?" The tall ghost laughed at the short ghost's fearful expression. "You're not a person with any merit, why would it? People like us are sour when they are eaten." Now was not the time for me to be sad. I had to save myself and my daughter. While I was distracted, my phone buzzed in my pocket. It was a private message from someone named Taoist Xianqing. On Douyin. The incense your mother-in-law gave you is indeed specially made. Generally speaking, this kind of incense is meant to summon a respected elder to protect their younger generation. Also, the water and rice offering you mentioned is meant to have the elder move around more in the underworld and protect the younger generation. You won't go wrong by following your mother-in-law's instructions. I hesitated for a moment and quickly swiped past the message so the two ghosts wouldn't see it. The tall ghost became suspicious. Hey, what message did that woman receive? The short ghost snorted disdainfully.
No matter what message she received, it must be from someone her malicious mother-in-law hired to encourage her.
My hands trembled as I held my phone. I clicked on the IP address of Taoist Xianqing and found that it was in our city. Was this really someone my mother-in-law hired? Or was it her alternate account? As I thought about this, I continued to walk forward, my heart pounding, getting closer and closer to the incense. There was almost no one around, and the red camellias in the flower beds were blooming wildly. At that moment, the phone rang again. Before I could even put the phone to my ear, my mother's soft sobbing voice came through the phone. Your mother-in-law pricked Little Orange's finger with a needle, and Little Orange has started to have a fever. The temperature is very high. I want to take her to the hospital, but your mother-in-law won't let me. What if Little Orange's brain is damaged by the fever? Please come back quickly. Your mother-in-law has posted a lot of talismans in the house. I don't know what she's doing. It's scary. The two ghosts started laughing without restraint. He, this woman's child is doomed. The evil mother-in-law wants to let the child die from the fever. If she goes back now, she might still be able to save her. This woman is so stupid. How could she possibly think of that? My mother's sobs grew louder. My dear daughter, these things are too mysterious. Let's believe in science and take Little Orange to the hospital as soon as possible.
Okay, Mom, wait for me. I'll be right back.
I hung up the phone, and the two ghosts started whispering again.
Luckily, the child is not alone. If she were alone, she might have already been skinned to make a drumhead. Isn't the drum in her mother-in-law's house made of human skin?
Hearing this, my scalp tightened. Perhaps I really didn't know people as well as I thought. I didn't know whether to go forward or backward. There was indeed a drum in my mother-in-law's house. The thought of that drum being made of human skin was terrifying. Taking a deep breath, I tremblingly opened Douyin's back end to see if there were any other options. Most of the comments were concerned messages from netizens.
How are you, blogger? Is the child safe? I'm so anxious. How has it been over an hour with no updates?
You must trust your mother-in-law. Your own family wouldn't harm you. If you listen to strangers, you'll regret it later. Your mother-in-law is deceitful. She might have sent you out to divert your attention. If you really go to fetch the incense, your child and mother will be in danger. Everyone had their opinions, and I stood there feeling increasingly anxious. I thought I had come this far, so I forced myself to move forward. I looked around, but the incense didn't seem to have any other strange qualities besides the two ghosts following me. The evil spirit they mentioned had not appeared, so what was I supposed to do? The cold wind howled around me, almost freezing my nose. Should I pick it up and see? I cautiously reached for the incense, but suddenly, a memory from my wedding year came to mind, my mother-in-law performing rituals in my husband's and my new home, which seemed quite bizarre. Her superstitious beliefs were not new, perhaps she had been planning all this since I became pregnant. Moreover, she didn't believe in Taoism or Buddhism but instead had her own deities to worship. Such behavior felt very much like a cult. I remembered that during my pregnancy, my mother-in-law forbade me from eating longan and red dates, claiming they were too heaty, while feeding me water chestnuts and sweet potatoes, which grew in cold, damp conditions. Reflecting on it now sent chills down my spine. With that thought, goosebumps rose on my arms, and I quickly tossed the incense aside and ran back home. But the tall ghost chuckled softly behind me. The short ghost shot him a sideways glance, and he immediately quieted down. I increasingly felt that those two ghosts were familiar, as if I had seen them somewhere before, but the urgency of the situation left me little time to think about it. As I ran, I thought I heard someone calling me, a voice that sounded so familiar.
Little Bo, don't run!
The voice was strikingly similar to my deceased father's. Even I knew better than to look back when someone called me at night. I kept my head down, pretending not to hear, and desperately rushed toward home. When I got home, my mother had covered the house in talismans, and golden bells were tied with red strings on the ceiling. This scene was enough to scare even someone who had seen a lot, like me. My mom was curled up in a corner of the sofa with Little Orange. She had already prepared Little Orange's milk powder and diapers, ready to take her to the hospital once I returned. The tear stains on my mother's face remained, and her hands tightly protected Little Orange from any chill. Seeing me return, my mom exclaimed anxiously.
Your mother-in-law is acting crazy. She won't let us go to the hospital and even blocked my way out. If something happens to Little Orange, I won't let her off the hook. A child with a fever is not something to joke about.
My mother-in-law, initially pleased at my return, grew cold upon seeing my empty hands.
Why didn't you bring back the incense? Do you really want to see something happen to your child?
Her expression was grim, and this was the first time she had spoken to me so harshly since I had known her. Are you still not awake? She pulled out a green branch from behind her and, wetting it with talisman water, aimed it at me. My mom hurriedly shielded Little Orange with her body and used her back to block the blow. Though I was usually patient, I felt fury rising. What are you doing? Why are you hitting my mother? My mother-in-law's branch swung high but lacked force, and my mom didn't feel pain, only some water got splashed onto her clothes. In a trembling voice, I said, "You don't want to take Little Orange to the hospital while she's burning up. What are you planning? Are you waiting to swap your fate with Little Orange's so you can have good luck?" My mother-in-law paused, seemingly realizing something. Is it because after you blew out that incense, you could see spirits that ordinary people can't? Did those spirits tell you I want to switch Little Orange's fate? How can you believe what the ghosts say? Her expression softened a bit, but her tone was still anxious. Those ghosts are all bad. Why would they help you for no reason? You're out of your mind to believe in wandering spirits over your own family. There was no resentment in my mother-in-law's eyes, only concern and worry. My heart softened a little, and just as I thought maybe I had mistakenly trusted the wrong people, my mother-in-law's phone buzzed incessantly. My mother-in-law rarely used her phone, yet today she was receiving so many messages, which made me suspicious she might be conspiring against me. Everything was hard to gauge. Seeing my expression waver, my mother-in-law continued pressing, "It's so late now. Taking the child to the hospital will only torture her. Besides, the child's fever is from the needle I pricked her with. If she didn't feel so hot all over, she might have already been taken by some other evil spirit. In any case, you already know there are two ghosts waiting outside. If you take Little Orange to the hospital and something happens, you'll be responsible." While it sounded reasonable, I genuinely didn't know what to do now. My mother-in-law noticed my hesitation and directly dragged me to the kitchen, lighting the stove. I felt a warm embrace, and my mind began to clear. My husband sent me a photo of himself after getting off the plane. He would be home in half an hour. Seeing me checking the time, my mother-in-law seized the opportunity, grabbing the green branch beside her and sprinkling the talisman water on my head. Suddenly, I felt the weight on my shoulders and back lighten, and my thoughts became clearer. I remembered that the two ghosts were the robbers who had made headlines 3 years ago for killing someone during a home invasion. They even set fire to the victim's house, causing the family to perish. Remembering the voice from earlier calling me Little Bow, my eyes brimmed with tears. "Mom, did you call back the soul of my father for me today?" My mother-in-law's face turned pale. "Yes. I had hoped your father would come to help you, but who knew you would leave him behind on the way?" I felt immense regret, hating myself for not recalling those two murderers sooner. They had been irredeemably evil during their lives. Could it be that they had become kind after death? I didn't understand why I could only see these two spirits but not my father's soul. "Mom, why can't I see my dad's soul? Why only those two? Your biological father passed away early, but at least he had fulfilled his duties while alive, dying a heroic death. She replied, her tone softer. Now he serves under the kitchen god. He isn't a wandering ghost. How could he allow you, a living person, to see him? No wonder the two ghosts had said there was an evil spirit near the incense. My father, as a righteous man who died saving others, was someone they feared. It was only because I had extinguished the incense that my father could not come home with me. My mother-in-law gently stroked my back, comforting me. It's okay, little Bao. Your father will be back soon. As soon as he heard about this, he rushed back from Thailand. Thankfully, it's not far. I wanted to slap myself. The reason my mother-in-law's phone had been buzzing was that my husband couldn't reach me and had informed her about his return. Seeing that I was recovering, my mother-in-law's complexion also brightened. She grasped my hands earnestly and said, Little Bao, this matter can't be delayed any longer. You must quickly bring back that incense and your father. At 2 o'clock, the Een spirits will come to claim what they desire, and Little Orange's life force will be drained completely. Looking at my mother-in-law's worried face, she didn't seem like someone involved in a cult, but the bowl of chicken blood she placed in front of the propane tank still made me uneasy. Regardless, I chose to believe my mother-in-law and not the murderers. Okay, Mom, wait for me. I'm going to get it. I rushed out the door, and the two ghosts that had been following me tagged along again.
Oh look, this foolish woman is getting tricked by her mother-in-law into retrieving the incense again.
Heh, we'll be warming up soon. That old witch is using the woman's deceased father, so she's probably eager to see him. The short ghost taunted me. A child lacking love is about to meet her doom. She might not see her father, but a death-bringing evil spirit instead. I studied their faces and realized their skin appeared burned, as if they had tried to cover it up with gray ash. Was it true that the manner in which they had taken lives would dictate their torment in death? Their faces seemed to align with those of the murderers I had seen on the news. I couldn't waste time pondering this and hurried ahead, but the more I walked, the more I felt something was off, as if I were caught in a ghost wall, constantly wandering aimlessly through the neighborhood. The tall ghost let out a cold laugh from the air. Looks like this woman has figured out our scheme. The short ghost scratched his head, confused.
Why?
The tall ghost scoffed.
She looked at our faces several times. It seems she has recognized the terrible things we've done.
The short ghost sighed.
This act is exhausting. She can hear us, but pretends not to. What do we do now? We can't just kill her. The time isn't right yet.
I glanced at my watch. Only half an hour remained until the time my mother-in-law had mentioned. Yet I continued to wander the community, sweating in anxiety. Just then, a flashlight flickered to life in the distance. The tall figure moving through the darkness was strong and imposing. When I saw the person's face, I nearly cried out in excitement.
Husband!
You've been suffering. Where's the incense? Let's find it quickly. Not bothering with small talk, I led my husband to the location of the incense, and once I ignited it with a lighter, warmth began to envelop me. I could almost hear my deceased father's voice whispering,
Silly daughter, don't be afraid. Dad is here.
After this incident, Little Orange became fearful of fire, even shying away from candles, yet she wasn't afraid of liquefied gas or the kitchen. It seemed she understood her grandfather was watching over her, which gave her courage. As for my mother-in-law and me, we silently agreed never to speak of the events of that night again. My mother maintained a scientific perspective in guiding my daughter to view the world, as nobody could truly understand things that existed outside the realm of science.